Good evening. I hope and pray that all of you are faring as well as possible in this really extraordinary time. May God continue to watch over you and your families. I want to thank Father Philip, Drew, and Trish for keeping our church community so well informed and linked through the technology at hand. I want to especially thank Father Philip for his daily reflections. That is not easy to do. Each day he considers where we are in this strange journey, and he talks to us, all of us, as a father he is to us, giving us words of consolation and helpful suggestions for us to continue forward in a healthy way. He has asked me to contribute as often as I want or I can, but I'll have to say that most of the time I find it pretty difficult to find words to give you that are helpful and that are healing. Forgive me for the weakness of my own faith. I also want to thank my own children and their spouses and their children. Too often we baby boomers speak a bit disparagingly about millennials and about Gen Xers. In our case, our children, who are in one or the other cohort, are probably teaching us more about how to navigate our way physically and spiritually than we are for them. As some of you know, Pamela and I decided decades ago to try to give each of our children a pilgrimage experience. To that end, our son Troy and I spent 2 weeks in Greece and half of that time on Mount Athos. Our daughters Sarah and Joel made pilgrimage with Pamela and me to France, of all places, for an Orthodox. And we were blessed in many more ways than we could have ever expected. But our first pilgrimage was to Russia in 1996. Our daughter Erin had spent a semester in St. Petersburg while a college junior, and our daughter Hannah and I joined her at the end of her school year to travel for 3 weeks with a 20-year-old Erin as our guide, and she was exceptional. It certainly changed me, and I know Hannah would say exactly the same thing. But more than Hannah's and my own experience, Erin's 6 months in Russia, and I believe she would say this, were transformative for her. It is from that background that I want to share some of Erin's recent thoughts from her blog and my own rather feeble observations at the end. The entire posting is well worth reading, but I've only excerpted a small portion of that for this reflection. These are her words as she writes, so forgive me for reading, but it's worth it. Please bear with me. As part of my heart always resides in St. Petersburg, Russia, at Kazan Cathedral, the place where, at the age of 20, I began to truly know prayer. In those days, the cathedral had only been recently reopened to worshipers. As a side note, in 1996, the Russian government had only just recently, within the last year or two, maybe 3 years, decided to begin to give back property to the churches and to let them be used as churches again, and that took quite a bit of time. And sometimes it was only for special occasions that they were able to use an existing building that had been a church. For decades before that, the cathedral had been the Museum of History of Religion and Atheism. And the icons and the holy items had all been removed from the church. Only a handful of small icons stood on stands around the barely functional church when I lived there, to spend my afternoons there after university classes came to an end. There, in an enormous empty space, I soaked in something unspeakable and unknowable. It's something of which I rarely speak because it defies language for me. Again, a side note, Erin took us there when we were with her in 1996. And then Pamela and I, again, when we went back recently, we went there. And I still remember the first trip there, venerating an icon of the Theotokos, which was exuding myrrh, and the fragrance was overwhelming. Back to Erin. In the decades before my heart moved into that cathedral, the relics of the great Saint Seraphim of Sarov had been hidden in the attic. For years and years his body lay in hiding, known secretly among believers in the gilded city of canals. Guards stood at the doors of the museum, and some days women would silently bring flowers or blooming branches and leave them near the doors of the enormous building. If asked why they were leaving the flowers, they would simply say, "They are for Batushka," which meant Saint Seraphim, or as they would say, Father Seraphim. Quietly, unobtrusively, they brought their gift of love to the saint. Silently, they waited. Right now, our lives have drawn closer into our homes. We've begun to more severely distance ourselves physically and from our neighbors and from our loved ones. As my physical circle grows tighter and smaller, I continue to think of those dear and brave women. And this week I've learned something new about them and their courage. What made them so bold and beautiful? I always thought it was the bravery of the gift of flowers, but that's not really it. Their strength was courage in the face of the unknown. With no idea when or if their present reality would end, they marched on. They continued to leave flowers for Batushka Seraphim, not knowing if his relics would ever come out of hiding, not knowing if the museum would ever again become a place of prayer. They feared not the unknown, and in this they survived and they thrived. As a nation, as a world, we sit this month in the tyranny of the unknown. I soaked in the stories of those women at Kazan Cathedral with flowers for a reason. I knew I would need their response someday. In March of 2020, we don't know what tomorrow will hold. No one does. We turn to experts and modeling to guess how many people will be infected with the virus. We look at reports about readiness and supplies and hospital beds and attempt to make predictions. We watch statistics from other countries or states and guess what might happen in our own neighborhood in the next day or week. But we just don't know. These are my words. The title of Aaron's blog post was "The Tyranny of the Unknown." Most of us, and most of the time, we think we have some idea of where we are in life and what comes next, be it good or bad, difficult or enjoyable. We know what is or is not in our bank account, where we're supposed to be tomorrow, I hope we do, and how our families are doing. We generally we are looking forward to the next thing, or we're preparing for a task that may be difficult for us. But today, all of that is upended, and in a way that leaves most of us wondering what the outcome will be, not just tomorrow, but for weeks or months or years. Families have been separated. Some are in hospitals and cannot even have visitors. Some have lost their jobs. Some are wondering if their employers will even exist after all of this is over. But not everyone. Some of us are able to take a longer view. But so many of our brothers and sisters, our relatives, and our friends are affected in a far worse way than some of us, and we hurt for them. There are so many stories of kindness that we are heartened. Over and over, we read about them. And then we read the next story, and the brief heartening may be shattered. We wish we knew what is going to happen, but we don't. And brothers and sisters, it's always that way. As much as we think we can see what life holds for us, it's only an approximation. We just don't know for certain. That reality is only heightened now because things have changed so very, very much. The Holy Fathers always counsel us that we should live now. Do now what is good and right. Pray now. Love now. Repent now. Forgive now. Remember the saints and their lives now. Ask their intercessions now. The holy saints throughout the ages are interceding for us now, even when we fail to ask them. But ask now. Believe and trust in the mercy of God now. Our transcendent God is drawing all those to himself who seek and ask to be drawn to him. As the psalmist says, "Be still and know that I am God." He loves us, and he's given us so many signposts along the way. Purpose for yourself to remember all those times where God has delivered you. Purpose to remember that now. Let's not be tyrannized by the unknown which is to come. Let us trust in the God of heaven and of earth. Our unknown in this world is preparing us to enter into the great mercy of our God who is with us now. Back to Aaron's words. And those women with the flowers, most of them did see Batushka Seraphim again. Because the Soviet Union fell, the museum was closed. And someone who knew the secret brought out St. Seraphim's body, and the cathedral was reopened for prayer. Some of those women didn't live to see it, but I did. And I will continue to draw my strength from them. They walked boldly each day into the unknown, and I will do the same. Brothers and sisters, may we follow their example. God be with you all. I love you.